Hello, friends. Welcome to A Little View, or if you've been here before, welcome back to A Little View. This is the podcast where the perspective may be small, but the conversations are anything but small. I'm Gwen, obviously your host, 26 years old, college grad student, a health coach, and an advocate for all things. This is the podcast where we talk about things that not only aren't talked about, but being the voice for the unrepresented and having empowering conversations about healing our mind, body, and soul. People love to throw the word around inspirational or being strong or any big words like that. And I think it's way overabused. But today on the podcast, we have someone who is truly inspirational, who has been through a lot and doesn't let anything stop her. She not only is an advocate, she is a survivor, an activist. That's just a couple of them. And I'm not gonna say more because I could go on for a long time. I'm gonna stop it right there so she can share her story and we're just gonna dive right in. This is Becky Curran.
Thanks so much, Gwen, for having me here today. I'm thrilled to be here and thank you for your kindness. So I have achondroplasia, the same type of dwarfism that you have, Gwen. And I was born into a family with no history of dwarfism. So of course, my parents were fearful when I was first born because they didn't know what that meant for my future. They didn't have access to the internet. They only had access to a few resources locally here in Boston, where I grew up. But when they found the resources, one of the best resources was in Baltimore, Maryland. We drove 8 hours to see Dr. Stephen Kopitz. He really played a key role in my upbringing. He really encouraged my parents to treat me like they would any other person, including my average height older sister. Let me go out there and fall. And that's the best way I'm going to learn and grow. Don't just let me get away with things. I know maybe some people have never gotten grounded or gotten in trouble because no one wants to offend them. But I really felt that my parents held me to the same standard as my sister. And I think that has led to the success that I've had in my adulthood, especially when I face life's greatest challenges. And currently, I tour around virtually because it's possible to do now, doing public speaking. And when possible, I do like to be in person, interacting with audience, sharing my life as a person with dwarfism, and also my passion for advocating for greater representation both in media and entertainment and corporate America.
I feel the same way as in I was raised into an only child with dwarfism with average sized parents, and I feel like it's very common, especially being a little person, for to get babied or to get like coddled because of that. And I feel like I or you, we've learned through our struggles because that's never happened. I've even recently said on a podcast too before that like my dad, when I used to climb on counters, he was just like, well, she's gonna fall or she's gonna learn. And people would be like, aren't you scared? He would be like, no, because how is she supposed to learn if she doesn't fall? So I was treated the exact same way.
Exactly. I had an example where I was sailing. I grew up sailing, very active in it all through my childhood. And there was an article that had a photo of me falling out of a boat. So many people who saw that article went right to my parents and said, how could you let her do that? Why wouldn't they let me do that? I had taken all the steps to be a successful sailor. I knew how to swim. I knew how to save myself in those situations. So there was nothing that was going to stop me or them from letting me.
Going back to you public speaking now, how long have you been doing that for?
I started speaking in 2012 and I was a little unsure about how it would go starting off. I was living on my own out in California for 6.5 years, trying to break my foot into the entertainment industry. I got to a fork in the road where it was a mutual decision to leave a television studio where I was working, and I didn't know where to turn next and felt that I needed to come home and reset. And at first, I was thinking in my head, oh, no one's going to want to listen to me. How do I just share my story as a person living in a world that wasn't made for me? Like
Yeah.
my whole upbringing and the challenges I faced, and then also my experience in Hollywood. So my sister invited me to her class. She's a teacher at the time in middle school, and she just said, I talk about you all the time to my students. Why don't you come and share your story? And then you can also practice your speaking by coming to my school. And I said, okay, that's a great use of my time rather than feeling like I'm going for a visit and I leave and it's not as engaging. Shortly after that, I attended a Little People of America regional meeting. So for those people who aren't as familiar, there's a national organization that has a conference every year in July. Then there are regions across the country. For the regional event, it happens over a weekend, and there's always a parents' meeting. So I decided to sit in on a parents' meeting, and I was learning about the challenges that a lot of students were having, especially when they are going from elementary to middle school or middle to high school, because they're meeting a whole new group of people. Some of the parents invited me, or they worked with their schools to invite me to come speak to the administrators, let them know the accommodations I had growing up in kind of a roundtable meeting. They could ask me all the tough questions. And then I would speak to the whole student body, sharing my story with hopes that that student didn't have to feel more left out than they already do or nervous about the move from one school to the next. So after I did some of those, I then went to different Rotary Club meetings, just really trying to figure out every possible space that I could speak and share my story with hopes that each speech leads to more improvement. I was living at home with my parents. I did get to a point where I was able to start getting some paid speeches, but still not enough to live off of. So I knew that speaking was still something I wanted to do on the side. After about a year and a half, I was asked to do a TEDx talk, and I did it on disability representation in the media because that was the career experience I had up until that point. And then I ended up working at SAG-AFTRA, the Actors Union, in the diversity department, and really felt connected to the Performers with Disabilities Committee because that relates the most to the advocacy work that I do. And while I was in New York, I had the opportunity to still go out and speak places wherever I was asked to. And I just continue to say yes. Anytime someone asked me to come share my story, got very involved in being a podcast guest on Rant. I think that it's helpful because anyone who speaks on any type of topic could benefit from hearing my experience. Something new that I've added to my speaking topics is the mental health journey that I've gone on more recently with losing my mobility and also losing my infant son. So I think that is a topic that more and more people can relate to than those who may think that they don't need a disability inclusion conversation or they know nothing about dwarfism. But everyone knows about mental health. Everyone knows about motherhood and the idea of losing your child. And I think that has helped me find more of a niche and wider audience beyond just speaking in the schools and advocating for little people specifically.
But I'm sure too, even going through these hard times, because I recently had multiple surgeries and you kind of question like your purpose and what you're doing. And I'm sure giving these speeches, it gives you a sense of purpose too, knowing that you're helping other people through your trials. These are not the best that I had to go through this, but if I can help one person, that will help me. I'm sure that's how you felt.
Exactly. And when I started sharing the story after my son passed, I had so many mothers of multiple children who have never lost a child come up to me and say how they felt so connected because they just can't even imagine. I had to imagine because it did happen.
Well, that's me, so thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
And would doing your speaking, would you only go to schools that had other little people, or did you also go to schools that you would just be a speaker there?
Went wherever I could find contacts. I think one of
Yeah.
the biggest challenges is trying to find the right contacts and also people with the budget, because if it was a school that was more than close driving distance, I would want to make sure travel expenses are covered. I had one parent at a school that I didn't end up going, parent of someone with dwarfism in the middle of Pennsylvania, and they were trying to advocate for a budget for me to come to the school, and it would prove to be challenging. I appreciated the effort. And the parent was saying part of their proposal in conversations that were happening with the school was, you always find a budget for clown presentations. Why can't you have an educational presentation on dwarfism that can help my son feel more welcome?
What is the difference.
Exactly.
And did you kind of just put yourself out there so you didn't charge because you were just getting your foot in the door?
Exactly. And there are some places that it's just known that they don't pay. And it took about 6 months for me to get my first paid speech. And it was just by Googling the word disability. I found a program here in Massachusetts called Understanding Disabilities. They were going to have a speaker who was blind, and I called them and asked just to be put on their roster for future opportunities. And they said, actually, our speaker fell through. What's your rate? And I just had to come up with an amount. And from that point forward, when I went to even the schools advocating for students with dwarfism, I made sure there was at least a small budget because it was important to get paid for my time.
Do you think, even though these schools, they're asking you, or even they know who you are, there was some misconceptions? Did you have a feeling of fear when you went to these schools, kids maybe saying wrong things?
Yeah, there's someone whose school I went to in New Hampshire, and I think a letter was sent out by the school because one of the students, they said, the only reason we're having this presentation is because a midget's coming to our school next year. And by hearing that comment, I just was like, what communication did the school send home to the parents? And what are the parents relaying to their child? And there was a disconnect somewhere. I think I have the ability to change people's perception by the time I'm done with the speech. So sometimes my mom will be in the audience and then she'll hear kids making comments, but then at the end, their perspective and comments change to the positive. So I was more concerned about getting to the root of what communication was sent home, and would it even make sense to send a communication home if that's what it's going to lead to? And why? I don't even know why it would have had to be like it's a presentation. It's a way for people to learn. Are they told about every presentation that happens?
Exactly.
So that just felt didn't sit well. There was another time where a principal tried to make it feel more of a celebrity experience for me, where you're going to get up on stage, you're going to do your speech, and then you're going to leave. But the most important part is the interactive Q&A part.
Yeah.
I want the students to ask me the questions. I don't want to feel othered. I often talk about how celebrities and people with disabilities all just want to feel connected. And there's a sense of isolation because people think we're untouchable. And fortunately, we were able to change the agenda. I think the most important part is really getting to what are on these students' minds. I don't think any question's offensive. It's the ability to answer whatever may be sparking their curiosity. And I much rather them ask questions than make comments and assumptions.
They're asking to get an answer, and then once they get that answer, when I used to work in retail, kids would like say stuff like, "Oh, why is she so small, mommy?" And parents would be like, "No, no, shh." I would just walk up to them and be like, "You know what?" I would either tell them I'm a little person, or I would be like, next time you come in, I'm gonna be 6 feet tall, and then it's done. They get the question, but at least they got their question out, and now they're done. Now it's okay. Let's go back to playing. It's fine. I don't care anymore. So at least give them that opportunity to ask questions, and like you said, to show them that you're a real person.
Exactly.
Even though you came from Hollywood, was it scary in front of a bunch of people that you didn't know doing those? Because I still have a hard time doing this sometimes.
Right. It is. Well, public speaking is the number one fear about death. It's a reasonable concern or fear. But I think it depends on the audience. If I have a good interaction at the beginning and really feel like it's a welcoming community, I think I'll show more of my strengths and get right to it. But there will be other times where during the pandemic, there were a lot of times where companies would hold meetings on Zoom or Teams. People would be in a room together and they put the screen off so I couldn't see the camera. So I'm just staring at a black Zoom screen,
Yeah.
and that was the hardest. So I rather see people and know that there are people consuming the message than have it be completely blank and try to present in front of a screen. And that probably is one of the challenges too with doing a podcast, because you know that it's going to the wider audience, but it, I don't think sometimes there's a rush that goes through my body right before I speak, but then it goes away. It's more challenging for me if I have a formal script. When I did my first TEDx talk, you have to go by very specific guidelines by the TED organization. So I needed to have a script, but I had to memorize the script. I had up to 18 minutes that I could use, but I ended around 12 because I was too nervous and I forgot the rest of what I was going to say. So in order to wrap it up nicely for it not to look like I was nervous, I just ended it.
In the beginning, I have like a little bit of scripts, but I really try to just do conversational. And if that question gets skipped, then it's whatever. Or if we end up talking about that, but then it doesn't really make sense when I'm editing it, like that just gets flopped out. But like kind of doing bullet points or just kind of writing the questions down, not being like, well, now I have to say this because you don't really know what the person's gonna say. And not only do you public speak, but then you also are part of a PA advisory board. What exactly do you do at for the advisory board?
So I am currently the employment chair for Little People of America. So about 6 years ago, I attended the conference in San Francisco in 2019, and there was a vacancy in that role. And my goal was to try to bring more employment opportunities to the organization. Historically, there's only been one employer that's shown up, and that was Radio City many years ago. And LPA made a decision to stop Radio City from attending until we have a bunch of other employers showing up so people don't think that that's the only employment opportunity that exists. Constantly try to bring more organizations to LPA and have them share whatever opportunities they may have, but it's been slow.
What is it?
So job opportunities,
Yeah.
internship opportunities.
Okay.
City of Hope has been one that's reached out. Intense
Oh,
Jobs
yeah.
have reached out, but we can make those opportunities available to the membership. But one of the biggest challenges is trying to figure out who in our membership wants to do what, because it's hard to help everyone if we don't know what people want as career paths. And I think one of the issues is that there may be people not working and not seeking employment because they don't see themselves represented. And employment allows for financial empowerment and confidence
Oh,
and
yeah.
hope and purpose and passion. Even with the conferences that happen every summer, there are 3,000 or so people there, but there's only a portion of that who are actual little people because people's families show up. Nice to try to get more of a sense of how many people actually identify as having dwarfism and what do they want to do for career paths and how can we help them.
Is there a way you can go more about that too?
I think they've tried to send out surveys, but I just don't know if we've gotten to exactly where we need to be yet. But whenever there are opportunities to have like LinkedIn do a webinar, we try to do that because they can show people how to update their profiles, and that's a great way for everyone to
Yeah.
reach wider audiences. We've had different people within the organization who work at different companies have panel discussions and talk about their challenges, and especially in talent acquisition where they're the ones hiring people. So we're always open to ideas, and I want to continue to see little people thrive in the careers that they want to pursue. But I think there is a disconnect on how we're represented in society and what people think they're capable of.
Or being a little person having dwarfism, it's a broad spectrum. Some people are physically unable to do stuff, and there's more people that are more able to do stuff. What I was more trying to say is the limits of what they can do and what they can't do. So I think that makes it a little harder. But I think just giving my 2 cents, having medical doctors, like having, or even people from the medical field, because I feel like that is very important because if a little person works for a medical field, then let's say another little person comes in, seeing someone who is representing you, you're more likely to get treatment if you see someone that's just like you, if that makes sense.
Exactly. So if we could get more people to just share their stories and come forward so we know who to identify. I think we have tried to send some surveys of who'd be willing to speak for future events. So this summer at the conference, I think I'll try to get a hold of people and see if we can get another survey out.
And if you need any help with anything, let me know.
Yes, absolutely.
But then also getting more on a personal level, one of the things that you have overcome these past years is, like I said, I know for me, having surgery, these past couple leg surgeries, it's not really the physical pain that's hard, but it's more the mental aspect of going through all that is the hardest part for me. And for you going through your spinal stenosis journey, that is very hard and a condition that affects little people and is very overlooked in the medical field. How has it been for you mentally and physically?
Yeah. It's been challenging. Attending a work conference in Orlando. This was in July of 2023. And it was the first time where I opted into using a scooter, a mobility scooter that a lot of little people use. When my parents first introduced me to a Little People of America chapter meeting when I was really, really young. And we walked into the room and I saw a lot of people with mobility scooters and canes and wheelchairs. And I said straight up to my parents, that's never going to be me. That was one of the reasons why I didn't actively get involved in Little People of America until college, when it was a pivotal time in my life where it made sense to find connections with all of my friends and I never looked back after I got involved, but I was so hesitant because I just thought I'm in the best shape. This is never going to happen to me. Even I did have my first spine surgery when I was 15. And I just bounced back so fast. I was 15, 29 days of school I missed, but I was still able to get back on track and graduate with my class, and life seemed fine. But then it was 2014 when I moved to New York City. I
Yeah,
was
yeah,
walking everywhere
yeah,
and I was in the best shape because I was walking everywhere.
yeah.
But I started to feel some subtle symptoms of spinal stenosis. The doctor who performed my surgery when I was 15 said, I can't promise that you're not going to feel symptoms again, but just try to stay in the best shape possible and see what happens. So I started to feel some symptoms when my best friend was visiting me in New York and we were doing a lot of walking. So I thought that I'd see a specialist just to get some advice. Of course, some specialists may say, let's do surgery right away. And others are like, this surgery is going to be so risky, especially doing back surgery a second time. Let's wait until the symptoms are unmanageable.
Yeah.
So I kind of went down the path of let's wait till the symptoms are unmanageable. I found the specialists in Delaware, and they told me that I could see them until I'm 35 because it's a children's hospital. So I just made yearly appointments, 33, 34, 35.
Oh,
Then I couldn't go to them anymore. They kind of hinted that, yes, you'll probably need surgery eventually, but don't rush it if it's not impacting your everyday life. And it really, at that point, was just impacting if I was going on long walks.
yeah.
Shorter walks were more manageable. So then some time passed and I was sick, I believe, when I got pregnant and had a baby. And those 9 months, I didn't feel any symptoms. And I thought it was really weird because I thought that that would be the time where it just got worse. But I was carrying a baby. I carried him the full term. So I think because of the pandemic, not really moving around much, I wasn't feeling them. So I just thought, oh, that was a breeze. I know we haven't gone into specifics. I lost my infant son, and the grief I experienced took a toll on my body. And then I started really feeling the symptoms. And when I was going to that work conference where I opted into using a scooter, I knew that things were bad. I required a step stool to be able to get up into the seat. And the only time that I would get out of the scooter during the day was to go to the bathroom. And I was having accidents because I wasn't able to get on and off the scooter fast enough. And that was an indication that my bladder was challenged. So the surgeons and doctors through the medical advisory board told me it makes sense for you to address that as soon as possible if you do see those symptoms. So I left my work conference in Orlando and went straight to Baltimore to Johns Hopkins Hospital. I didn't have an appointment. I took a chance. I went in through the ER hoping that I would get seen by the doctor that I wanted to see, Dr. Groves. And I was in the ER for a night and a half, and then fortunately was admitted into the hospital. And it took 2 weeks for the surgery to get scheduled. I needed to stay in the hospital because my legs were weak, my bladder was weak, and I needed to address the challenges. The surgery ended up being a 10-hour surgery at a spinal fusion.
Is that like half your back then?
Yeah, so
Okay.
from the middle down to the pelvis. And then I had a laminectomy just on one level, T5. And the reason why I had a laminectomy in one area and fusion in the other is the laminectomy was an area that had not been touched before. The fusion was a redo of the areas that had been touched before when I was 15. And after the surgery, I was inpatient at Hopkins for a week. Then I got a med flight to Boston to the rehab hospital here, Spaulding Rehabilitation, and was there for 7 weeks.
Mhm.
I left Spaulding after 7 weeks without a catheter, but unfortunately, I got a urinary tract infection within a month, and it showed that I just wasn't able to empty my bladder. So I have had a catheter ever since, which is a big confidence sucker. It's
Mhm.
just the reality of what's going on. I also have some type of a spinal cord injury. I've been gaining a lot of mobility with my rehab and physical therapy. I will require lifetime adjustments to my bladder and bowel regimen. But the fortunate thing is because I've stayed active with PT now almost 2 years later, I have been making a lot of strides in the physical mobility part of things, and that area does give me hope. It's really tough living in the mindset that I had a son and I only had him for 6 months because he died from an accident. And then I started having medical complications, and I was in the hospital a total of 72 days, the hospital and the rehab. And I just constantly think, where would he be if he was still around? And how would I manage that? And I know there are plenty of people with disabilities who have a parenting role, but it's really tough to, of course, I would do anything in the world to have him back and have great health, but also how much more challenging would that be if he was here and I was trying to manage my health?
I'm not saying this, he shouldn't be here, but I also think sometimes we're given situations to make us really look us in the eye, like, okay, this is real. We've all been there. A lot of little people like, that's never gonna happen to me. I'm not gonna ever be like that. I know I won't be like that. I'm gonna do everything I can not to be like that. But like, if you just keep ignoring the situation, it's only going to get worse. And it also shows like how people don't realize stress, anxiety, that doesn't just affect you, that affects you physically as well.
Exactly. It's a lot.
Are you able to live by yourself now?
So I have a personal care assistant that helps me in the afternoons through evening when I go to bed. I'm on my own from 11 to around 8 a.m. And then I have a nurse that helps me from 8 to 10 just with the morning routine. But then I'm good for the rest of the day till the PCA comes. Yeah, I can cut down the PCA hours because I'm out doing a bunch of stuff. There are things that were hard even before my surgery, like with reaching, just the added challenge of the surgery and regaining strength.
And you're
That's
fused though too, so it adds even harder.
exactly.
It's not like you can bend all the way.
Exactly.
And also adding the big factor of you're a woman and being a woman and fused, not that I know, but that is very challenging in itself. Would you say growing up, being very independent, having people help you now is takes a really big on your psyche?
100%.
Yeah.
Uh, Before the pandemic, I traveled to like 20 cities on my own in the month of October for Disability Employment Awareness Month for speeches. And I did it all on my own. And I just think of all the logistics to even take a trip.
Yeah, yeah. That's scary.
Yeah,
But I'm glad, like, even now, for people that don't know you or don't follow you on social media, you are still pushing, making those strides to get better. So even though you may never be 100%, but like, you're walking, like, I see these videos and I just think they're amazing because you
mhm,
are trying to better yourself and get better because you want that.
exactly.
What is um, have you noticed, even though I'm sure you're hard on yourself, you notice a big progress? Like, have
My aunt was actually helping me last night because we ended up going out to a baseball game later than when my PCA was able to be here. So she was helping me, and she hadn't helped me in probably like 6 or so months. And even as she was helping me, she said, "You have gotten so much stronger. You need to recognize that. You need to do that." And I feel like I face the same when people give me compliments
Yeah.
about speaking and all that I'm doing. And I'm in my head, I'm just like, it's what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm just doing what I'm supposed to be
Yeah.
doing rather than taking a minute to soak it in. I do know that I've made a lot of progress, but I think I'm just always going to be hard on myself
For
knowing
sure.
more progress to make.
I think looking at yourself in the mirror and like, I'm a boss ass bitch. Also, on top of that, talking about your son, because that added another layer of stress, is did you feel did you feel to blame in that whole situation ever? Because I can't imagine what it was losing a son. And how was that whole experience for you, especially not knowing that that was going to happen?
When I did end up announcing to family and friends that I was pregnant, of course, people were excited, but they were also cautious. Really, the reality didn't hit in until I actually had my son and he was in my arms.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was related to the limited space he had while he was inside of me, because he did go 39 weeks in a day, and that's normally a very healthy baby. But he did have achondroplasia, and sleep apnea was detected right away. So he was on supplemental oxygen in the NICU for 23 days. Just I felt an adrenaline rush because recovery from the C-section was super fast. I just was ready to be his mom and do whatever it took. But I can't lie to say that like there were challenges that came with having a medically compromised child. So we did a sleep study in Boston. So the hospital where he was born was just outside of Boston. So one of the days he and I took an ambulance to Boston because when you go from NICU to NICU, you have to make sure you're like in very sterile environments.
Yeah.
Found confirmed that he had sleep apnea, and then we had to leave the hospital with supplemental oxygen that he could use for sleeping. And then he also was sent home in a car bed, which is when a baby has to lay flat in because of his head and neck control and
Oh,
his every time he would do the car seat test. You can't be discharged from the NICU unless you pass the car seat test. So this was the alternative. Once we brought him home, we just had him in the car bed. It was challenging trying to get him from place to place. We had a second sleep study at 3 months, and then the third one was at 6 months. And at 6 months, that was when there was an accident where the people who were involved with the study thought to look at the machines rather than the baby, and it led to him flatlining. So he stopped breathing 25 minutes. And it's about 8 minutes when you stop breathing where you would get significant brain damage. An hour that felt like forever for the medical staff to get him to breathe again, but he required oxygen and he had a breathing tube. That's all they were able to revive, his heartbeat and his breathing. He
his,
was completely brain dead. It took about 12 days to decide whether we'd let him go. And his brain mass in MRIs were disintegrating. So it was not good news. And if we were to take him home, he would need to have a ventilator, feeding tube, just a
yeah.
lot of challenges we would face if we chose to bring him home. So we did make the decision to let him go, and he died in my arms after 2.5 hours. Not an easy experience,
Yeah.
an experience that I hope anyone has. Really hoping to continue to educate medical professionals on how to do better and not make that mistake ever again.
Yeah.
Uh, but it's pretty tragic, the thought that I was ready to be a mom.
Yeah.
And I know people tell me I still am a mom and Jackson will always be my son, and he will, but I don't have evidence to show for it.
Yeah, and I'm sure you have those questions of like, what if he was still here? What kind of child would he be? What would he be like? So having those and
When we were leaving the NICU, the nurse kept advising us to always check the baby, like check to see if their color looks different. The machines are great to have as a backup, but they're not the things we should rely on. We should really look at the baby and the color of their skin. Like if it's white, it means something's wrong, or if it's gray or blue, like there's a big issue. So I was with Jackson in a dark room, so I couldn't see what color he was. And they didn't think to pick him out of the car seat. And so he was in the car seat doing the car seat test before the sleep study, but he had all the tubes on his head that are used for the sleep study.
yeah.
So that was adding extra weight to his head, which led to the head to neck close off of the airways. So when they came in, they thought that they just had to reset the machines rather than taking a minute to turn on the lights and check him. Yeah. It was not fun. And then what you were saying about one of the most challenging experiences soon after Jackson passed was kind of immersing myself back into the community and going to a Little People regional event. And I was in a parents' meeting, and one parent had their daughter with them close. And we all kind of went around and mentioned our name and who our child was and how old they were or when they were born. And this lady said August. And I knew that it had to have been the August when Jackson was born because this was a young baby. And I just lost it. It's hard not to struggle when I see other kids that were born around the same time as Jackson or the age that he would have been.
Yeah. What do you think his death has taught you?
There was a person on social media who talked about their child, maybe it was like their first birthday or something, and they wrote, "I will always protect you." That statement really hit me hard because as much as I wanted to always protect Jackson, I couldn't. So I think the concept that some things are out of our control, as much control as we want to have, we have to be open to the idea that things may not go as planned. One of the biggest things, even coming out of that experience of losing Jackson, is that I used to wake up in the middle of the night all the time fearing death. And I have not had those thoughts since he passed. I'm not saying that I want to go anytime soon. I have a lot of life to still live and work to do.
But that is moving for anybody else who's gone through stuff because, yes, this stuff is hard, but you don't want to die right now. No matter if spinal stenosis came at you, no matter if Jackson's death, you still have a purpose on this earth. And I just believe God put people on this earth for a reason. And like, you are like, no, I still want to be here, like, no matter what. And I feel like that shows other people like going through stuff that no matter what, you'll get through it. It's going to be tough and there's going to be days, but you have a reason to be on this earth.
Exactly. I think especially when it comes to advocating and bringing awareness to the dwarfism community, we still have a long way to go because we're underrepresented in society and that leads to exclusion.
Thank you so much, Becky, for being on my podcast today. I truly appreciate it and just opening up and telling your story. I think it's going to hit home and hit a lot of topics for multiple people, no matter if you're a little person or not. So again, thank you so much and thank you everyone listening. And yeah, so make sure to like and subscribe for more episodes and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much again. Bye.